Cambridge City Council is now in session. Pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I, the City Council will now enter into executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation. The executive session is slated to last 45 minutes. Kenmore City Council is coming out of executive session. No action will be taken from the executive session. I'm now adjourning the special meeting and calling the regular meeting to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Baker. Will you use your microphone, please?
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Present.
Councilmember File,
Present.
all present.
Would you all please rise and join me in the flag salute? Next on the agenda is agenda approval. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with item 16. The last item, executive session, removed from the agenda.
So moved. Seconded. Councilmember File.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with item 16 removed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The agenda stands approved. Next on the agenda, we have two presentations. The first is to introduce Chief Matt Cowan, Chief of Fire of Northshore Fire District and the Shoreline Fire District.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Great. So thanks for having me report out. I first want to say thanks. It was a pleasure meeting you, most of you, this last week at the legislative send-off. I apologize, I'm not in uniform. I'm on the East Coast at a conference right now. But I want to give a brief update and hopefully some future updates on how things are going with the contract and the regionalization efforts, with the Northshore Fire Department. As you all know, in June, the Shoreline Fire Department entered into a contract to provide services to Kenmore and Lake Forest Park. And it's been really nice. It's been going very well. There's been a lot of little, issues and so forth that have popped up, but overall it's been very smooth. And I, want to give a lot of kudos to the employees and the personnel at the North Shore Fire Department for making it work out and be as seamless as possible. We worked proactively to make sure that we were addressing as many of the issues as possible. I do want to bring attention to a couple of things that we've done that might be of note. One of the things that we believe in at Shoreline is to have continuity of care as much as possible with our patients. And that includes transporting all the way to the hospital. And so that was one of the level of service improvements that we immediately instigate. Well, I shouldn't say immediately. It was about a month actually after we started the contract, by transporting all patients all the way to the hospital. And to accomplish that, we also upstaffed the an aid car out of Station 57 in Lake Forest Park to relieve some of the pressure off of the extended out of service times that the aid cars would have in doing those transports. So that was a really nice thing to be able to provide as far as services go. We continue to refine some of our levels of service and our staffing models and so forth. 2023 is going to bring further reform and all that. It's been really nice that we've been able to, maintain or even increase the levels of service while providing savings to the citizens of Lake Forest Park and Kenmore. And we will continue to try and do that throughout the rest of this year and all that. I know that it's one of the big things that's on the council's radar is the use of Station 54. It's a building that actually kind of hit our radar before we even went through the permitting process. And I want to thank the council or the city for allowing us to extend the permit for 2023 to be able to continue renting it out to the renter that we have there. But one of the things that I was a little sensitive to, and then it was, definitely confirmed with the permitting process, was what are we doing for the long-term, planning and vision for that station? And I've spoken with a number of you about this, but I want to make sure that everybody was aware that probably this next month, we're going to enter into a fairly comprehensive evaluation, a long-term evaluation of what the needs are going to be out of that area, and making sure that we can serve all of the citizens in the south end of Kenmore. And if we determine that we don't need that station, even for an aid car or any other kind of responding apparatus, then we will look at what we can do to transfer or dispose of the property. This would be a board decision, and but I'm hoping that probably by April, May at the latest, that we can have that evaluation done and have a recommendation to the Northshore board to be able to determine what it is well in advance of the end of the year, which is when that permit would run out. And the renter has already been notified that that his opportunity for that property will end at the end of this year. Whether it's something that we are going to take control of, or if we're going to do something different, then that will be determined sometime in the next few months, hopefully. So I know I have a short amount of time, but I wanted to kind of brief you on a few of those points and then open up to see if there's any questions for me that I can try and directly answer if possible.
Questions? I am not, Councilmember File.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate you coming before us today and sharing with our community. I did hear that you've done a bit of work with Shoreline in partnership on recommendations around housing solutions for density. So I was wondering if you could share anything with us that you learned from that experience.
Well, we continue to see the growth, especially around the light rail stations that are, if they stay on target, that are going to go live here this next year. There's 2 light rail stations, one around the 145th and 185th areas of Shoreline. And the city's been, I think, very progressively and proactively trying to create density in those areas with rezoning and so forth. And so we've been very cognizant of that. We've been in the communication loop on those things so that we can try and make sure that we're looking to the future and making sure that we prepare for those growth areas as well. As you know, probably know, Shoreline has experienced quite a bit of growth over especially over the last few years, and it's going to continue, especially with the light rail and just everything else that's going on. I think it's similar to what's potentially going to occur in some of the rezoning that I've heard about. I don't know a lot about the exact details of what Kenmore's planning, but it seems very similar to what Shoreline has done. And so, again, I just want to make sure that we're in the communication loop and being able to work collaboratively to address what the current and future needs are. I don't have specific details so much as far as what the affordable or missing middle type of density that we're looking at, but I do know that we've experienced quite a bit of that in Shoreline.
Thank you. I would invite you to participate in that discussion as it's coming back to our Planning Commission. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you again for coming before us today.
No problem. And I would like to also offer up, and I think I mentioned, is I would like to continue developing the relationships and be able to report out as needed or quarterly basis or whatever you require.
Other questions? I am not seeing any more hands up, Chief. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I know it's late where you are right now, so thank you. We look forward to partnering with you and hearing from you again in the future.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is Bastyr Strategic Plan, introduced by Deputy City Manager Stephanie Lucash and presented by President CEO Dr. Devin Byrd and Vice President of Advancement and Enrollment Services Dr. Jeanne Galloway.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Devin Byrd and Dr. Jeanne Galloway from Bastyr. And as you know, Bastyr is our largest employer in the city of Kenmore, and our partnership with them is extremely important. We're so grateful for the strong leaders that we have with us tonight that represent Bastyr. And we've spent a lot of time together partnering on various collaborations and can't wait for all the future collaborations that we'll have in store. Tonight, we're going to hear more about their strategic plan and also the master planning effort that they have underway. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Galloway and Dr. Byrd to tell us more.
Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Deputy Lucash, and also Mayor, as well as council members. We are excited to be able to share with you our new strategic plan that was approved as of this past summer, which is in fact a 5-year plan. It is a result of several meetings that took place through the course of meeting with our Board of Trustees and also with our faculty members, also with our staff, in addition to students. As we advance to the first slide in this particular area, our vision as an institution is to be able to serve as the world's leading academic center for advancing and integrating knowledge in the natural health arts as well as sciences. We also have a firm focus on transforming the health as well as the well-being of our community. And along with that, of course, our goal is to ensure that we're training the future leaders in these areas, and also recognizing that body, mind, and spirit are intrinsically inseparable, and that we continue to model an integrated approach to education, research, as well as clinical service. Along with this, our new 5-year strategic plan.
Dr. Byrd?
Yes.
Dr. Byrd, I'm sorry. Are you going to be sharing your screen so our audience can follow along? Because we all have the presentation, but it'd be great if it was shared.
Okay, give me just 1 second. I was attempting to share, but for some reason, I'm experiencing a little bit of difficulty with that. So give me 1 moment. Okay, are you able to see my screen at this point?
No, we can see you, but not your screen.
Okay.
Dr. Byrd, if it's easier, we can share the screen on this end and you can just tell us when to click through the slides.
Yes, please. Thank you very much for the assistance. I appreciate that. Perfect. Thank you. We can just advance to
Maybe you can update us a little bit on Bastyr, what's happening at Bastyr coming up to kind of fill in the time.
Absolutely. Well, we have a number of new initiatives that are well underway for our institution. We have some new and upcoming aspects related to engagement with our community as it relates to, outreach from our clinical services in this particular area. We will continue to engage with our community, not only at the downtown location, but also through efforts from our campus aspects. If we can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. I just spoke about our vision as well as our mission. I'll give you a few moments to pause and just sort of read a few items in this particular area. We maintain a very firm focus on our vision, as we continue to move forward with the idea of being able to engage in the transformation, as I mentioned, of the health and really the well-being of the human community through prevention as well as wellness aspects. Our mission, of course, is also squarely focused in on ensuring that we're able to achieve that goal. The other piece of this that is inherent or implicit within this particular statement is not only the education, research, and clinical service, but it's also the engagement with community. That is an aspect that we are continuing to grow and also to expand over the course of time. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So through the result of multiple efforts, as a result of our board of trustees, our faculty, our staff, our students, we were able to actually articulate 4 separate major areas that we would focus on. The first of which has to be the first area of importance is our students and their experiences. Next, ensuring that our employees are firmly engaged and that we're also providing support. Partnership engagement, which I will also comment on, in addition to the last area of innovation. And if we can go to the next slide. The student experience really is compiled of portfolio of offerings or the types of degrees and programs that Bastyr is focused in on offering. Our idea is not only being able to strengthen those resources to support those programs that are in existence, but also to look at new programs and offerings in the upcoming future. We want to make sure that we also gain the ongoing information from our students so that we're able to provide the best possible experience while ensuring that we are focused in on their overall careers. And those careers, of course, start when they enter in through our doorways and not once they graduate, which is why we are squarely focused in on ensuring that we have mentorship and those opportunities developed for our students through not only our alumni and our existing faculty, but also through industry experts. And ultimately, overall, that we are ensuring a very positive, forthright, and strong life cycle for our students. If we can go to the next slide. The next area, which is focused in on employee engagement and support, really is the idea of how can we develop our employees in the most effective ways through trainings, through developmental opportunities for succession planning and leadership aspects as well. We want to make sure also that we are engaged in evaluating our compensation structure. We all know that our nation is being faced by inflation, and we want to ensure that we're providing the appropriate wages and compensation all the way around for all of our employees. Of course, we want to be able to retain the employees that we do have, which helps to build a very solid foundation and to ensure the success of not only our students, but also our departments and our partners alike. Wellness is also another area that we are focused on over the next 5 years, ensuring that we provide opportunities for our employees to not only be able to engage in those aspects that they enjoy, but also to ensure that we provide them with the necessary bandwidth to be able to achieve those particular results. And then finally, thinking about incubator opportunities for our faculty and staff to engage with each other in a way that will allow them to have the best possible opportunities and ideas come forward. If we can go to the next slide, please. Our partnership engagement is one that identifies how we can expand those relationships with educational institutions, organizations, civic areas as well, and of course, institutions such as the City of Kenmore. We really want to make sure that we are focusing in on the Center for Social Justice as well as diversity. And that's an area for us that has a lot of promise and also an area that we feel very strongly about continuing to develop. Industry collaboration is another area that has been placed as a priority for us as we move ahead. We want to engage with employers. We want to engage with industry. We want to ensure that we have a way of being able to move our educational opportunity into a different realm of operation while maintaining the foundation that is so critical to us. Clinical service delivery. How are we providing services to the patients and those who provide so much trust in what it is that we offer, while also evaluating our methods and also our efforts to ensure that we are connected with historically marginalized as well as disenfranchised groups, whether that's through African American, Asian, Latinx populations, and also indigenous populations, as well as LGBTQ and other populations as well. And then, of course, making certain that people know about Bastyr. Jeanne Galloway is at the helm of that and ensuring on so many areas and levels that we continue to promote the institution and that others have an opportunity to learn about the great work taking place. If we can go to the next slide, please. The area of innovation is the last, where we are looking at the center that will help us to ensure that we're looking at technology while also evaluating where we have operated well. And of course, ensuring that our university resources are appropriately aligned with those efforts so that we are making the best possible use and efforts with what is available to us. Our university systems is an area that we have been evaluating and we've been modifying over the course of a few years. And we continue to engage in that process that will allow us to operate at maximal capacity. Along with this, thinking about ways that we can provide integrative health focus for our students at the educational level, while also thinking about additional professions as well as disciplines that are not currently under the guise or the roof of Bastyr that we can partner with. And then finally, thinking about ourselves as an educational platform. Yes, it is our focus to maintain our concentration on students, but we also, of course, need to continue our focus on our patients, our community, the industry, as well as others who may not have an opportunity to learn or to understand about Bastyr, and also for us to learn in the same breath. If we can go to the next slide. Beyond this, we firmly feel that we have a very strong connection and continuing developing connection with the city of Kenmore. In the context of the city of Kenmore priorities, we firmly believe that in the first area, as far as the climate action plan and environmental stewardship, that through our soil gardens, through the development of what we see to be in the future, a hydroponic garden proposal, as well as our Sacred Seeds Path, which honors many plants that are indigenous to our local area and tribes, as well as the idea, in fact, that we have climate conferences that we've held that have focused in on the necessary aspects that our institution as well as our society should focus on given the changes that we have observed. We also have a curriculum for kids that focuses in on this area, and I'm excited to be able to share that with you in the upcoming future. In addition to this, number two, with regard to the affordable housing stock and area, we're excited about our partnership with the city of Kenmore and Plymouth Housing. That will allow us to be able to create a clinic and apothecary and also a tea house to provide services for individuals who live not only in the building, but also for Kenmore residents abroad. In addition to this, our diversity, equity, and inclusion advancement is one, as you can see to the right, that we recently hired on our AVP for DEI in March of this past year. We also developed a new DEI strategic plan, and we also have required training for employees in this area and also optional training that has just been put in place and will be for our students. As far as economic development, we are seeking those strategic plans and opportunities and through partnerships. While our community engagement and participation is really steeped in an initiative called the Bastyr Community Initiative that seeks to engage our students and staff, as well as our faculty, with members of the community. And that is a developing aspect that we look forward to sharing even more so. And we're also continuing to grow our community as well as community and continuing education division that will allow for other opportunities for the community of Kenmore to experience what Bastyr has to offer. As well, in terms of fostering and creating fun, we believe that our strategic plan is fun and has several aspects to it, especially through our partnerships and innovative ideas that will bring technology to the foundation of Bastyr and provide new and innovative ways of connecting with kids, with our youth, with our families, as well as adults and citizens. And then finally, responding to the pandemic, we believe that our strategic plan is doing so as a way of helping to lift individuals into a state of wellness, providing them with methods to even prevent illnesses and or other conditions they otherwise might experience. Connecting to Kids, or C2K, is a project that will directly focus in on elementary, middle, as well as high school students and provide them with elements of nutrition focus as well as STEAM aspects. And then, of course, I've already mentioned the Plymouth Housing collaboration. If we can move to the next slide. As we begin to round out our presentation here, our master plan is focused in on several aspects. And of course, while we have not had an opportunity to develop all of this in detail, and that's the purpose of our strategic plan, we do have some ideas and thoughts about how we would like to move forward. And those are listed here. The first and foremost is health, wellness, and prevention. How can we partner with the city of Kenmore? How can we continue to move forward and make the city of Kenmore even more of a place that is focused in on this area? Secondly, how can we engage our Kenmore residents more directly in ways that will positively impact their lives by providing education, services, as well as opportunities for us to learn more about their needs? We also want to make sure that we're providing authentic, substantive, as well as positive impacts on people's lives. It is our focus to ensure that we are engaging in the right ways, which is why we are seeking opportunities for feedback as well as engagement. In addition, looking at the development of green space. Many of you know that Bastyr has wonderful green space that is already utilized at this current moment, but we do have ideas and thoughts about how we might further develop that space to provide even greater opportunities for our youth, as well as for focused projects that will directly target our adults as well as their own health and wellness. In addition to this, we are seeking those partnerships with industry that will allow the academic as well as the scientific and market needs side to be able to advance in a very direct as well as definable way. That will bring additional attention as well as a footprint to the city of Kenmore in a very positive way. Innovation is also another area that we are seeking to engage in very, very directly. What can we do to maintain what it is that has allowed us to be successful, but also is necessary for us to embrace as we move ahead? And how can we do so in the context of a city that is so responsive as the city of Kenmore has been? And then finally, perhaps even more aspirational, but also in reality, we would like to become even more of a destination location for local residents and also out-of-town visitors. And over the course of the next number of months, we will be developing ideas and thoughts about how we as an institution can fold this into our master plan and begin to pave a pathway that will allow for others to seek Kenmore for the beauty that it has in terms of being the top of the lake and also being a destination that focuses in on health, wellness, prevention, community. So I want to stop there. And if we can go to the next slide, we would like to entertain any questions that you might have at the current moment.
Questions? I think your presentation must have been very thorough because none of my colleagues' hands are up right now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much, City Council.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We really appreciate you coming here. We appreciate your partnership with the city.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Next on the agenda is public comment. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or city clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development of projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi judicial matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We currently have 5 individuals on site signed up for public comment, and we'll take them in this order, starting with Dakota Rash, followed by Keith Hunter, John Culver, Tracy Bonashinsky, and Ryan Johnson.
Good evening.
Give us one moment, sorry.
Good. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Kenmore City staff and council. My name is Dakota Rash. I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. Climate change is happening now. Science has recently warned us that in the Pacific Northwest, if we stay on our current track, we may experience low to no snow events where we get low to no snow for consecutively 5 years at a time as early as 2040. That could rapidly change life in this area because snow fuels our spring and summer water supplies. It recharges the groundwater. It does so much. And so not having it for up to 5 consecutive years is truly panicking, but we can change course. We don't have to stay on that trajectory. And so I would urge you all to please consider taking bold new action when you think about funding the Kenmore Action Plan. You've made a great plan to try and address climate change, and you're making good strides towards accomplishing that. I was very encouraged on the discussion about fully funding the CAP. And what that looks like to the citizens I've talked to and myself are 3 things. First, please Get experts in the room. I don't think it's right now anyone's job in Kenmore to solely focus on climate or implementing the climate action plan. And even just hiring one person to do that is an incredible burden. Along with finding millions of dollars in grants, I don't think they'll be able to shoulder that weight all by themselves. So please hire a CAP manager, a visionary to overview the entire project, an administrative assistant to search for grants and also take care of all the other things like ordinances and city code and complying with that sort of thing. And an ecologist, because a lot of what Kenmore wants to do in your rhetoric is address wetlands, which comprises this city, and ecological restoration. You need an ecologist to do that. Please also then allocate $1.1 million annually to accomplish the CAP. Climate action is too important to condition on maybe someday finding enough grant funding, especially by 2025, by which time you have already slated making massive carbon reductions. One person searching for grants and trying to accomplish that is not going to work out. Then also please appoint a citizens climate committee to work in climate education and outreach to your community. I know that there are many valiant citizens of Kenmore who care a lot about the climate that would be willing to sign up and dedicate hours to save you money and work with the city to work on outreach in this community. I am one of those people. So please take those bold actions and help Kenmore be a leader in climate action. We truly need to do that if we are going to have the just, livable future that we all deserve. Thank you.
Keith Hunter.
Been a resident of Kenmore for a very long time. I first of all want to thank you all for your service to this community. I'm very impressed with what has been done here with the parks, the bridge. You guys are really doing some improvements with the walkways and whatnot. However, I'm very disappointed with what has happened with Simon's Road. For as long as the city has been incorporated, I have been trying to get something done about the boat trailer parking there. They create a very dangerous situation. However, that situation is only a couple days out of the year. And the real problem now began and snowballed after the right-hand turn lane on a no turn against red at 68th that backed the traffic all the way up the hill. Installation, now this is also only a problem for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It isn't a dangerous problem like the boat trailer parking, but now it's dangerous 24/7, again, for the second time. When the city painted the turn lane lines in the street, which people really didn't need, it created an opportunity for people to use it as a passing lane to compete for a position at the light. No, there is no sidewalk between 72nd and 68th. It's a very narrow pathway between the stone wall and the street. When I used to have to walk my grandson to the bus stop at 72nd and back, and the bus would stop in the mid-center lane, put the stop sign out, back the traffic up. As soon as that sign went in, the cars would come flying down there, right up against the curb, and it was terrifying to walk on that pathway. I had a meeting at that point in time, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, with the engineers here who came out and they looked at the situation. They agreed with me. They put a solid line in to block people from entering at 72nd. It took quite a while for people to figure it out, but they did. And for over 5 years, I have only seen a couple of people use that, or should I say misuse it. This past summer, I called the city again to complain about the boat trailer parking. I was told it would be fixed. It was going to be turned, there was going to be no parking signs at any time put up.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Your time is up.
That was 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Wow. please go back to the way it was and put a solid line in to block people from entering at 72nd when it is unnecessary. I saw a lady pushing her baby stroller down there the other day, and somebody came down the hill and blew right by her next to the curb unnecessarily.
Thank you, Mr.
It's
Hunter.
frightening.
John Culver.
Good evening, Council. John Culver, Kenmore. Re-upping one of my signature issues, once again, the COVID pandemic is not over. We have all but abandoned the effort to report timely numbers on deaths, let alone cases at this point. The best we can tell, we're still averaging over 500 deaths a day in this country. I spoke to object when Kenmore followed collective avoid and lull by rescinding its local emergency declaration. And I will do so again tonight, borrowing from legendary news anchor Dan Rather, who begged us to take this more seriously. He says, there is not sustained leadership on this issue on either side of the political aisle. There is apparently no political benefit for such, as Americans crave normalcy, and many are willing to ignore the grave reality and look the other way. Ignorance in this case isn't bliss. Nature doesn't care what we think. We would do well to remind ourselves of that lesson. It can help us with COVID and with other challenges that no doubt lie beyond. And Council, what could be a more fitting segue into the star of the show this month, the Climate Action Plan. Much like COVID, we are going to have to proactively tackle this problem head on if we hope to ever achieve some resolve. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said just today, I am deeply frustrated that global leaders are not giving this life or death emergency the action and investment it requires. Show me anything more important than addressing a life or death emergency for our entire planet. It answers itself. This council set its own priorities and made that case quite clear by placing it at the top of the list, number one. And now's the time to match that intention with conviction and action. Y'all are in a position to give climate action the funding it needs. Your own exploration on the topic said it. $1.5 million for complete funding. It's time to deliver. And I know the pushback is coming, so let's address it. If that exceeds councilmanic authority, thereby requiring a vote of the people, there's your solution. Put it to the vote of the people. I'll get Max out there doing sign flips to spread the word. If the argument is that grant funding is real money, that should only embolden a full commitment upfront. If it's real money, great. Let's commit those dollar figures in the budget accordingly. Bank it and aim even higher. I can't pull punches on this one. It's an easy enough box to check in trying to present oneself to be a champion for climate, but not without commensurate corresponding action. The community environmentalist favorites are watching intently, and frankly, anything less than full funding would undermine your credibility on this issue, both collectively as a body and certainly individually. We need each of you to act with the urgency and magnitude this moment demands of us. Fund the cap. Thank you.
Tracy Bonashinsky.
It's good to be here with you tonight. Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. I looked out the front window of our house this morning and saw, I think it was this afternoon actually, and saw the wind sheeting rain down our hill like it wanted to scrub the asphalt off the earth. I looked down at my computer screen and saw a picture of an enormous wave crashing into the California coast like it wanted to crumble it into the sea. The world might be ending right now, I texted a friend. The world was not, of course, ending right then, but the earth is in crisis. I know you all know this. I know you all care about and value our environment and climate. I'm simply here to remind you with the imagery of those opening examples that the climate crisis is immediate and that addressing it in our beloved community requires immediate, robust funding and action. With that said, I am here to express my support for the ideas put forth by Dakota Rash and many other community members tonight for how to fund Kenmore's Climate Action Plan. I am also here with continued encouragement and support for giving Swamp Creek the space it needs to be itself through the TOD, the Transit Oriented Development District. And that's all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you tonight and for your service to our community. I appreciate you all so much.
Ryan Johnson.
Mayor and City Council. My name is Ryan Johnson, Kenmore resident, and I'm here to talk to you about a way to potentially address the parking issue at the Swamp Creek development. At the last meeting, it was noted that due to the 0.5 parking limitation, the car spillover may impact adjacent businesses. I think that this can also be an opportunity, specifically by creating a framework through which those businesses could lease open parking spots on a monthly basis to these residents. The rationale for this is that many of the surrounding businesses open at 9 and close at 5. Any commuter residents would likely only need parking outside of those times, which means that the primary use of these parking spots for customers during work hours would not be impacted at all. For businesses, this completely voluntary option would open up a totally new 100% profit revenue stream. And since each business would choose their own times, it would not impact their normal business operations. There would also be very little risk since businesses would know exactly who those cars belong to if issues occur. For the development's residents, this is simply another option. If there's a time range that's convenient at a price which works for them, great. If not, nothing changes from how things already are. As for existing Kenmore residents, I've heard a few comments opposing development at 0.5 due to its impact on street parking. If new residents had an alternative parking option that was convenient and guaranteed, they would be much less likely to use communal street parking. Also, since this plan would require nothing more than contacting business owners, asking if they would be interested and if so, under what terms, and then providing those options to these residents, it should have no impact on budgets or taxes. The previous meeting highlighted the link between parking and affordability. If a pilot like this was successful, it could then help increase the appeal of future affordable housing developments on a 0.5 model. And since that would minimize future new parking construction, it could also have a positive environmental impact as well. I'd also like to address the two most obvious concerns. First, that providing additional parking options will have a negative environmental and commuter impact. I think that idea rests on the assumption that these new residents would sell their cars to fit the 0.5 requirement otherwise. I don't believe that's realistic. Second, the chance that no agreement between residents and businesses would be reached. That is certainly possible, but in my opinion, government should be like science. You come up with an idea on how to help your citizens, test it to see if it provides value, and implement it if it does. The issue with that approach in government is that some ideas need to be implemented at great cost before they can be tested. The main advantage of this idea is that it can be tested in advance with essentially no cost or risk. So I hope you'll consider it. Thank you. Also, very quickly, Inflation Reduction Act, most money for climate legislation in our history. There's got to be some grants there. Thank you.
Mayor, we have no additional on-site public comments. Can I move on to virtual?
Yes.
If you are virtual and would like to give public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function. At this moment, I have 5 individuals signed up and we'll go in this order. Stacy Valenzuela, followed by Nancy Hansen. Then Elizabeth Mooney, Vicki Grayland, and Chris Olson. Stacy, go ahead.
Good evening, Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Residents have been filing odor complaints and pleading with the city for over 15 years to assist with their health and well-being from the odor and effects of the asphalt and concrete plants. Residents saw little action except more resident illness, more odor, more darker soot on their homes. We, the residents, continued bringing concerns forward. After requesting more action from the city, state, and PSCAA came the new NOC permit. We even, up until 2022, heard echoes of, oh, it's just steam and I don't smell anything in response. However, finding EPA came forward in 2020 with AP 42 validating it's not just steam. Due to varied materials and processes, up to 6 dioxides make up the emissions, and over half asphalt plants are in non-compliance of the Clean Air Act. We look forward to the actual testing, as well as breathing better air after the Air Pollution Board hearings, and appreciate Kenmore's support. We request that funding is needed and applied to the Kenmore CAP plan in action, not just hiring administrators. Clearly, we can no longer deny the effects of climate change. Our planet is dying. Natural habitat is covered with cement. Our fish are disappearing. Water contaminated. Birds, chicken, turkeys ill. Cattle deceased. Planet too hot. Rains too cold. Trees gone to development and wildfires. Everywhere. Disaster after disaster. We need our city to show support and commitment with funding the CAP plan with 1.5 million start, not just words. If action is delayed again, it could be irreversible. The treasurer of Kenmore will be gone. Just too little, too late. Thank you for consideration.
Nancy Hansen, go ahead. Nancy, are you there?
Sorry, I keep forgetting that. I agree with Dakota Rash and Tracy Banazinski on their funding of the climate program in Kenmore. And I also have something that is more practical and something that could happen right away, but I'm older and they're at an age where this matters more, so much more to them. And I have to respect that highly. I'm concerned that there haven't been more efforts in Kenmore for mapping wetlands. We've been talking about it for quite a while. And we live in a city at the bottom of slopes with lots of water. This should be a priority. I'd like to make sure that this is on the agenda for the council retreat coming up. Without the information gained by knowing all the sources of both above and below ground water, good decisions and best practice on building and development are not possible. We see regular examples of development that degrades the natural environment, and I've mentioned it a lot, and I think I'll skip that part and skip my example that I was going to go and just go to the part where we could figure out how to map wetlands. There are two parts of the wetland mapping process. There's on-site and there's the part you do by computer. On-site is tedious and more expensive, but the computer part is much simpler, and at least it could give a general idea of where water is underground, especially. A certified wetland specialist is required for both processes. There are students at the University of Washington Bothell who may have become certified and are looking for a grad project. I'm hearing for someone at the University of Washington who's working on a tool for the GIS system. And we are also looking for a certified person who may be available out in the, working in the community. It's vital that Kenmore, being at the bottom of hills on all sides, know where the water is located and which way it's going. According to Strong Towns, Joe Minakazi, who was in Kenmore, he said, putting a critical areas overlay map on the top of a city map is the very first thing you do in any city planning. Thank you.
Elizabeth Mooney.
Microphone then.
Hi, can you hear me? My video is not working. It says that you had stopped it.
We can hear you.
Yeah, can you turn on the video and start me at 3 minutes? Thanks. So can you start me back at 3, please? Thank you. Okay, hi. And I do want to start off by saying that I am here on our computer. Patrick O'Brien is in our house and would like to speak also public comment. So that's 10 seconds. But hi, I'm Elizabeth Mooney, resident of Kenmore. I support Dakota Rash's public comment regarding funding the CAP and including citizen volunteers to educate and engage the community. Hiring staff to write the grants is not going to solve our entire problem about climate change. And working with nurse professors about climate justice will help. We're involved in that with PERC. Making a difference fast enough in a meaningful way is going to require you working with not just staff. 2, we have Kenmore Lane's card room still available to open up and provide money for our community. Hope that you'll look into that. 3, I support Tracy Bonazinski's comments about Swamp Creek and the TOD and it being a larger buffer for the stream. 4, for CAP ideas that are easy to understand, rid us, this is number 1, rid us of the asphalt emissions. That's kind of a no-brainer for climate action in Kenmore, something that we should change first. Planting, reforest Kenmore compared to when we incorporated. I think if you take a before and after picture and work with Nancy Hansen's idea of mapping, we could take photos, show our progress of our tree canopy as we plant more. And thanks, Rob Carlindsey, for getting some of that going in the CATS program. Facilitate solar panel installations in our city. We have solar panels And maybe don't make it a requirement to have a permit from the city. Really incentivize that. That is a great idea. Have volunteers help with CAP. I've mentioned that, and Dakota did. Accelerate the infrastructure that should be concurrent with the mass transit, making biking and pedestrian use safer. Signage for air monitoring and sharing of data, signage on the Burt Gilman Trail so that people, if they get nasty emissions, know where to go. Knowing where the pollutants are, the toxins in our city is really important. And if we don't tell people in a mass mailing, they're going to think that some agency is taking care of them. Right now, Cadman Heidelberg is going to be asking for a stay on the retroactive permit on the 12th. Rehabilitation of our streams and fish barrier removals. I think hopefully that's going to happen over at Chetchathel that goes into Logboom Park. That's my beloved stream, and thank you for protecting that piece of property on 61st. Happy New Year. And here's Patrick O'Brien
For his 3 minutes.
for his 3 minutes.
Ms. Mooney, we're going to go in order and then I'll add Patrick O'Brien at the end if that's all right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Vicky Grayland, followed by Chris Olson, and then Patrick O'Brien. Vicky, go ahead. Vicky, are you there? I see that you are unmuted. Ms. Grayland, we will move on and circle back to you at the end. Chris Olson, go ahead.
Hello, can everyone hear and see me okay? All right, so I kind of have a transportation focus normally, and I would like to back up a couple other people that have spoken, Dakota Rash obviously being one of them, and fully funding the climate action plan. And part of the reason that I think this is important is while there is plenty of grant money out there and we should go and chase that grant money, we should also make sure that we are giving the resources to the people getting those grants. And one of the best ways we can give them those resources is having a solid plan on a city level, and not just having a plan, but having somebody who can organize that plan, who can work with other departments within the city, and coordinate and really see what grants we can apply for, and then have the two people who the minimum funding would provide grants for actually go and pursue those grants while the grant funding is there. Furthermore, that way, if we don't get grants, hopefully policies can be adjusted, and improvements and ways to address climate change beyond just through grants or through additional funding, but rather just through adjusting how we already do things. Whether that means narrowing up lanes, which the city's already done, so I shouldn't necessarily say that, but continuing to narrow up lanes and keep sidewalks wider or add in more permeable area for water to run off. All sorts of examples like that. I have a lot of other thoughts, but I didn't have time to really write tonight, so I don't want to just ramble and waste your time. But please fund the climate action plan, and please continue prioritizing multimodal transportation options. Parking was mentioned. I really, really like the idea of encouraging local private owners to rent out parking spaces and for us to actually charge for parking. It's something that we historically expect for free, even though it has a really large cost that impacts everyone, regardless of whether or not they use a car. And while I don't think it's realistic for people to just get rid of a car at this point, given how car dependent we are in general, hopefully eventually we can get to a point where we don't have to have a car. Right now I feel I have to have one, unfortunately. And I would like to get to a point where that isn't the case. The city has already made some good steps towards that. As it stands now, I pretty much only need it for medical visits, and even those I can oftentimes do locally, which is fantastic. But continuing to make walking and biking more safe, but not just more safe, more comfortable. We design roadways for comfort. We can design trails and paths and sidewalks for people's comfort as well. Anyways, thank you. Have a good evening.
Patrick O'Brien, followed by Danielle Olson, and then we'll try Vicky Grayland again.
Is the video? Yeah, the video's going. Good evening, City Council, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. I was at the legislative introduction the other night, and all the questions were to be submitted on cards. And I saw the cards go forward to our esteemed mayor, Nigel Herbig, who I watched categorize them and put them in some sort of order. And then they got delivered to the people that are our new legislators in order. And I feel like it would be much more fair if those would go into a box or a hat and be taken blindly, because you shouldn't be able to vet the questions with an elected official. They might have a bias. You never know. As far as the old fire station on the south side of Kenmore, you got to keep that because density is going up. We don't have Medic 1 over there. I was just picked up by the Shoreline Fire Department. Thank you very much. But it took 15 minutes to get there. They had to dispatch out of Shoreline during that icy day. And I would have much preferred a 5-minute pickup from our Kenmore aid wagon. So, you know, getting service out of Shoreline does take longer. So as far as the climate action plan, we need to get rid of that asphalt plant or you can scrub the whole thing. Tens of thousands of gallons of diesel and other solvents are in that process. And we are absolutely sick of it. And yet the city spent over 100 grand hiring Cascade Law Firm to protect city staff and the city council from taking legal action against the asphalt plant. That's number one priority. You can't have a beautiful city until that facility is gone on good, solid environmental ground. The 61st needs to have expanded parking for potential TOD and rapid bus service. The other day during that legislative introduction, somebody asked for a $5 million gift from the city to build low-income housing. We're a very small city, and I think we've taken on higher density and more problems that King County is trying to shuffle out of Linwood, downtown Seattle. And I would be very, very surprised if we're not already at the maximum of absorbing that load. And I think if Bothell and Woodinville would be considered because they're much bigger and they have a tax base. We don't have a tax base to be shelling out any $5 million. So get the card room back, please. Thank you.
Danielle Olson, followed by Victoria Grayland. Danielle, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't. Hi. So this is Danielle Olson, resident of Kenmore. Please attempt to fully fund that climate action plan for the health and resiliency of this city in the face of a rapidly changing environment that impacts people's lives and livelihoods right now. Dangerous heat waves are more common today than they were 30 years ago. The heat harms our elderly and our children, yet most households still do not have air conditioning or enough insulation, since protection from extreme heat was rarely needed until recently. Toxic algae blooms. To make it worse, on hottest days of the year, several beaches were closed because toxic algae blooms in Lake Washington would sicken or kill kids. Finally, smoke season. For the last few years, this area has experienced a smoke season that chokes our economy and endangers the health of our children and our loved ones. These changes are occurring now. They impact people directly now. Given the present reality, the city needs to decide the direction it should go to protect its citizens and remain resilient. Please consider hiring an expert to help the city determine the direction it wants to go and develop shovel-ready projects that can compete for a limited grant money, and decide how to direct limited funds for the city's resiliency and ability to adapt to very rapid change. Thank you.
Victoria Grayland. Victoria Grayland, go ahead. Victoria, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Ms. Grayland, can you email us in your comments? I apologize for whatever technical issues we're facing tonight. Is there anybody else in the queue?
There is no additional hands raised at this time.
Ms. Grayland, one last chance. Can we hear you?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember?
Can we invite Ms. Grayland to call in? It is an option.
It is, but it is 8:02 and we have quite a bit of business to get through. Ms. Grayland, I would encourage you to email in your comments. Hopefully we can get this worked out for the next time. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Would the clerk please take the roll?
For the consent agenda?
No, okay, never mind. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Consent agenda stands approved. Next on the agenda, we have public hearing on ordinance number 23-0569, extending and renewing interim regulations for development within the transit-oriented development district overlay for an additional 6-month period, presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent. We're going to give staff an opportunity to present first, and then we'll move on to the public hearing portion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight, the public hearing is to receive testimony on extending the interim regulations. The interim regulations were put in place to allow time for first the Planning Commission and subsequently the Council to consider permanent regulations for the transit-oriented development district. The Planning Commission presented their recommendations to you late last year, and in November of last year, Council gave direction. So staff is now working on direction for permanent TOD regulations. This is not the time tonight to talk about TOD regulations. Tonight is the interim regulations. So the interim regulations give more time for the City Council to complete consideration of ordinance adoption when brought forward. The interim regulations prohibit townhome development, and for those properties that do not choose to develop under TOD provisions, they must meet the base density of the underlying zone and include at least 25% of the total number of units. So the interim regulations allow development to occur while Council is considering permanent regulations. So if Council chooses to extend the interim regulations, they would be extended for an additional 6-month period ending July 25th, 23. They could be repealed earlier if the ordinance is adopted sooner. Thank you.
I'm now going to open the public hearing. For the public hearing, you'll be granted 5 minutes to speak. The same public comment rules apply, including stating your name, city of residence, addressing your comments directly to the city council, and not splitting your time with others. If your comments have been fully expressed by preceding speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statements by stating your name, city of residence, and saying that I agree with what was said previously. We will hear testimony from our on-site guests first, followed by virtual guests. Thank you for taking the time to participate in these public hearings. Clerk?
We have no individuals on site signed up for a public hearing. Can I move on to virtual?
Yes.
If you're virtual and would like to give public testimony at this time, please use the raise hand function. You may unmute when you are called to speak. We only have one individual currently with their hand raised. Stacy Valenzuela, go ahead.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Please continue the interim ordinance 220569. We desperately need very low and extremely low affordable housing. We look to you, the council, to direct city staff to follow the needs and concerns of our community and take action. Only approve permits from developers in the TOD that per ordinance 220543 include a minimum of 25% affordable housing on each project. Improving this by allowing only very low and extremely low affordable housing units would prohibit the abuse of the 80 to 85% units on people that, already can afford the current rents, and the extra money is actually paying for vacations and new cars. We also want you to continue to prohibit the townhomes in this area. There's a lot of opportunity right now for grants, and having the low and very low affordable housing allows for applying for these grants, which another huge release of funding may be approved. We can also work with other organizations like Plymouth Housing to continue to make one of your top priorities happen. Our residents that are working, earning 50% and below AMI will be drawn away, and more businesses can close if we do not have housing that they can afford. Our seniors and disabled are being priced out, increasing the local homelessness. Do we want hundreds living in encampments and in cars in Kenmore? We have an opportunity and an obligation to attempt to keep all of our residents sheltered and increase affordability for your kids to raise families too in the future. Enforcing the TOD ordinance and their guidelines helps the future of Kenmore. I know with my own senior mobile home park, we received a sale notice and rents are going up 28%. Several other in the area had their rents go up 50 to 80% and are priced out and left Kenmore. This is a crisis, and we need TOD to include affordable housing for low and very low. And we need to build like you guys are doing at 522 and 67th, the affordable housing buildings. Our future in Kenmore depends on it. Thank you.
Chris Olson, give me one moment to promote you. Go ahead, Chris.
Apologies, I just needed to adjust my screen there. So I actually just read through this very briefly, which is sorry about making you make me a panelist last second there. If I'm understanding this correctly, the interim or the extension of this interim code would effectively allow the city to continue working with developers, or at least developers, I suppose, working with the city in preparation for the eventual TOD work. And personally, I am a strong proponent of TOD. I think we need a lot more of it. And not only do we need TOD, but missing middle, as I've spoken out about in the past, just alternative housing options. Single family being the default is the reason why the city is at, capacity, as a previous resident spoke about this evening. But we are at capacity because of how we have used our land, not because we don't have land for people to live on. While Kenmore is a small city, there are other small cities that have significantly more dense populations. And people will end up living in their cars if there is a parking lot, but not an apartment building. I think that's something that's important. And I don't think that we will have low-income housing development constructed if we don't continue to work with contractors, if we don't continue to work with developers to try and create something or a system at least that will work. The city has been very aggressive about trying to create low-income housing from what I can tell. And I would like to see this interim proposal continue so that way we can continue to work with those developers and not just tell them, no, I'm sorry, you have to come back and apply in 6 months, but rather let them continue to work with this now so that way when we do adopt these plans, they can go ahead and construct. Yeah, I'm just a big proponent of TOD. I'd like to see you guys push that. I would like to see actually some of those zones expand. I know there have been concerns about critical areas and wetlands, and in my opinion, those are valid concerns. However, we should also be looking at what we can do to take parking lots and turn them into more productive uses. And they might still have parking underneath them, right? It still might be a parking lot, but I'd rather have a building over the parking lot that people can live in than just a parking lot that drains into Swamp Creek. Furthermore, parking lots are pollution generating. Buildings are not generally, or at least not as pollution generating. And so I'd rather have water that doesn't have oil runoff going into the river than water with brake pad and tire rubber and oil and all of that other stuff from vehicles running off into the river. I think that's about it. I just briefly read this, so hopefully I wasn't way off base. But regardless, you guys have done a good job and I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I'm declaring the public hearing over. We'll move on to the business agenda. First item, ordinance number 23-0569, extending and renewing interim regulations for development within the transit-oriented development district overlay for an additional 6-month period.
I have nothing further to say. Staff recommends that council pass the ordinance.
Do you have any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. The chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 23-0569 as amended by ordinance 22-0555 to extend and renew interim regulations for development within the transit-oriented development district overlay area for an additional 6-month period.
Second, and Councilmember Vile.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve ordinance number 23-0569, extending and renewing interim regulations for development within the transit-oriented development district overlay for an additional 6-month period. Motion by Councilmember Baker, seconded by Councilmember File. Councilmember Baker.
Aye.
Please use your microphone.
Aye.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. Next on the agenda, Development Services Code Compliance presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk, Building Official Tom Phillips, and Code Enforcement Officer Bridget Baker.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Kenmore City Council. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Samantha Loyuk, Development Services Director, and I have with me this evening Bridget Baker, Code Compliance Officer. And on the line also is Tom Phillips, our building official. And so this evening, just to get us started, we wanted to talk to you about, we have a presentation. Let's make sure we get it. Oh, there we go. There's Tom.
Out to the public, but not up to the screen.
How do you want to? Should we take a break to see if we can have it work? Because unless you guys can follow along with it on your side, you can follow along. Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, we'll try that, but we're told it works in Zoom. So we'll start going. So just this evening, just to start us off, I wanted to go over the agenda, which is really an overview of the code compliance program. Bridget does an excellent job as the one and only code enforcement officer. She's going to go over her current workload and the open cases, resources, tools, and codes that we have currently, including a property maintenance code that we have now, and then one that we're considering, as well as some staff recommendations for potential changes. And as we get started into this, I always like to look at the Kenmore City Council priorities and the mission. And I think that the work that Bridget and the entire department does is so important to achieving the priorities and goals that you have set forth. And so it's just a huge part of helping people to love where they live and protecting the environment and supporting diversity and fostering a sense of belonging. So that is just one way that we do that is through code compliance. So with that, I will hand it over to Bridget Baker.
Good evening, Council. So our department's approach to code enforcement is through compassion, safety, and education to achieve compliance. Voluntary compliance is always our goal, and we are often successful in obtaining this compliance through education. Complaints can be categorized in two different categories. One is proactive and the other is reactive. Proactive usually is a life safety issue, environmental in nature, can be acted on regardless if the complaint is received into the city or not. That would be like a work without a permit or illegal tree cutting. Versus the reactive complaints, typically those are zoning that affect the standards of living. They shouldn't be anonymous. The complainant must usually be affected somehow. And those are like typically garbage or overgrown vegetation or structures built in the setbacks. These complaints are primarily received to the city through the city's website portal, complaint online website portal. I don't know if you guys can see, but the amount of service requests that we received in 2020 through 2022, that's November, through November of 2022. We've had 79 junk nuisances, 22 overgrown vegetations, 37 building without a permit, and then 11 critical areas, and then 58 other code enforcement related issues such as like a sign permit or sign issues or animals or noises. Although one service request is categorized as one type of violation in here, typically these service requests actually involve multiple violations per request. For example, a service request may be identified as a general nuisance, but inside the description, the complainant then complains about the grass being overgrown and maybe a tree recently cut in the same complaint. So here's another chart which displays an increase in the reactive nuisance and property maintenance service requests we received between 2019, 2020, 2021, and then through November of 2022. And obviously you can see the increase throughout those years. I believe that it's primarily due to the increase of the population within the Puget Sound, and then also the increase of the amount of people that are teleworking from their homes and are home looking at their neighbors' yards or structures. So for each request we receive, we research and I respond to each and every one. We also try to manage and prioritize each one. Some of the struggles, however, that come with this is that they sometimes the complaints come in anonymous or vague, but we do our best at investigating with the information that we received. Code enforcement is another struggle. Is code enforcement is often used as a means of retaliation between neighbors, landlords, ex-spouses, business partners. So we do our best to try and educate them and, hopefully try and mend that relationship so future issues don't necessarily require the city to become involved. Code enforcement also is used as a role of or I guess I should say, citizens sometimes try and use the code enforcement as a role of an HOA. The city doesn't obviously enforce HOA rules, but because Kenmore is comprised of older homes intermixed with newer homes, a lot of them can have the expectation that the home should be held at a higher standard within the neighborhood. Code enforcement is fast, free, and many don't like to talk to their neighbors. So that's a lot of times I get calls asking for me to contact their neighbors. Anecdotally, a large percentage of our cases involve those experiencing some sort of crisis. Illness is a major one. Mental illness, heart attacks, cancer, strokes. The citizens are really affected by that. Older adults with physical and financial limitations, they wouldn't be in that situation if they had a choice, if they had the financial means to rectify it. Although I'm still enforcing the same codes, I need to be cognizant of their situations and circumstances, and I take those into consideration when I help them meet compliance. And lastly, the other struggle and challenge that I come up against is the public understanding of what code enforcement is and versus just being a bad neighbor or a police matter. So that involves a lot of education to the public. So when there isn't a quick resolution or a cooperative owner or condition that warrants a violation case, the service request is then converted into a violation case, sorry. The violation cases are often blatant violations, conditions, or circumstances enough to have on record repeat offenders, life safety issues, uncooperative owners, and often work without permits. As you can see, a majority of the cases are general nuisances. And again, just because it listed as one of the violations doesn't mean that the cases often have multiple violations. So one of the most challenging and time-consuming types of cases are those of the potential hoarding cases that I have. The hoarding is considered a mental illness, and a lot of times the hoarder has a value placed on each and every one of the items that we might be considered as junk. Our approach to this is the policy is to focus on health and safety. I always come out with compassion for both the violator and the complainant, because both are equally affected. I always try and offer resources such as we have mental integrated health systems, and that's run through the fire department, as well as Radar, which is through the police department. There's additional nonprofit help I can always offer, but they can always refuse. They don't have to take it. So one of the challenges on that is that I am not a mental health expert. It's very, very time consuming. And there is a 99% recidivism rate on those that suffer with the hoarding disorder. So we can spend all the money, clean it up, get it to where it's compliant, and it's gonna have a 99% chance of repeating. So here is a prime example of a hoarding case that I worked with. I opened this up in November of 2020. As you can see, this is the entryway to their home, and there is no access whatsoever. And so I started working with this person, and it took quite a bit of time to get it back into compliance. Again, we always focus on safety and health and easy and ingress, egress access for if there was supposed to be a fire or an emergency access for our emergency responders. So in this case, it's under minimal substantial compliance was achieved. In this case, it also involved multiple site visits, phone calls, emails, coordination of services. One service they did receive and took advantage of was the CCAP program, which offers garbage vouchers for qualifying people. And in this case, they were able to get rid of 2 tons of material. So we closed the case, right? No, wrong. That's where we talk about recidivism, and it comes back. So 3 months later, I have to open up another case, not as bad, but pretty similar. So this one, actually, this case took a little bit, or actually didn't take as much time as the last one. I think they understood kind of what needed to happen. And we were able to close this case again a month later. Again, not perfect, but it allowed for ingress, egress, and safety concerns there. So we closed the case, and then recidivism again. This time, 6 months later, we opened up this, and we're currently kind of at about the same condition. So this is what we need to do a lot of education on as far as what compliance looks like. Each of us has our own ideas as to what compliance looks like, and it can really differ from reality, as you can see in the one picture versus the other picture. So some of my other cases that I have, this is not necessarily a hoarding situation, but it's definitely a nuisance case. We were able to open this, and again, I offered some services for this particular person, and they accepted and were able to move forward and gain compliance. So the third case here is another example of having as many tools available as possible to obtain compliance. They utilized the CCAP program, which is a garbage voucher program. They also had church involvement. And then another program with King County Housing Repair Program, which offers a 0% interest loan program for qualified home buyers or homeowners. And so it really took a team and the right tools to get to this place. And it wasn't fun, but I'm really happy for this individual. So.
And Bridget, you're on slide 19 right now.
I am, yeah, I just turned to 20.
Okay.
So the resources and codes the city relies on right now for code enforcement is we have the 1997 Uniform Housing Code, the 1997 Uniform Code Abatement for Dangerous Buildings, the Kenmore Municipal Code, primarily Chapter 8, which is your health and safety. We utilize the fines, the CCAP vouchers, the police radar, mental health professionals, and then also community nonprofit agencies, and then the King County programs that they offer too. That leads to the next thing is how can we do it better? We have worked with our building official, Tom, and others to see if there are other tools available to do even a better job. And this is what we'd like to present to you. The Property Maintenance Code, the 2018, currently the International Property Maintenance Code. This is considered the roadmap to property maintenance and is used nationwide. It provides a more objective property standard, and it establishes minimum requirements of safety, sanitation, and appearance of structure and exterior properties. The requirements are specific, easy to understand, enforceable, and gives this city more discretion in application. The IPMC is updated every 3 years and is already fully compatible with the I-codes that the city currently uses, like the International Residential Code and the International Building Code. And I think there's like 17 others. Tom's got to correct me or not, but currently the city, other cities that utilize the IPMC are cities such as Shoreline, SeaTac, Bellingham, and Issaquah. And then there are a few others in there. In addition, there is also an additional menu of options for more restrictive codes and additional programs that you might want to consider on top of the IPMC. Such changes would be possibly garbage service, mandatory garbage service, some sort of restriction on tarps, size, color, material, as far as like non-flammable materials, et cetera. Temporary structures, 6-inch grass on arterial streets, cargo containers, again, limitation on size, duration, stacking, and then some other items that may be considered, such as a neighborhood rodent program, abatement program, drug house cleanouts, boarding standards, abatement, and then having the city come up with some additional partnerships and counseling services. So the following options are what the staff recommends, especially I would really recommend number 5 in particular is adopting the applicable sections of the IPMC to create a Kenmore property maintenance code within the KMC. But others, again, are such that the mandatory garbage collection, currently it's a voluntary program, and some additional restrictions on tarps, canopies, and then the vegetation. So wanted to manage some expectations on these. Again, the code update would allow us to have some more effective tools. It would promote sanitation, provide code requirements that are clearer and easier to understand, and then bring the code current with the I codes that the city has already adopted. The code update will not solve your hoarding or mental illness. Ensure that the city is always beautiful. Ensure your lawn is well kept up to anybody's standards, and then provide a solution for every situation because every situation is so unique. Any code amendment should be common and not in a reaction to a specific property, as well as ensuring the amendments are, you need to ensure that the amendments are not adopted under another agency's authority. There's some things to keep in mind. So our staff impacts, I can see if the delayed response and incoming service request, because it's going to take additional time to do the research, discuss the impacted departments, write the codes, complete the CEPA process, revise procedures, adopt, implement, and then educate the public. 2024 and beyond, if you just wanted to adopt the general provisions of the code, IPMC code, I foresee a streamlined code enforcement. However, if you wanted to adopt the additional restrictive code parts, there may be additional staff required to enforce the codes. There may be higher standards and of the community for having higher standards set. But the codes will need to be triaged on a based on a safety, health, and of the environment. So that is it. You guys have any other questions?
Questions? Councilmember File.
Thank you. You know, I really appreciate you did a thorough report for us, and I think it's something our community also appreciate. And also thinking forward to our growth of our city, I think these are issues, if better addressed, and if should we take a direction that would help ease some neighbors' concerns about growth. Well, I have a question about the hoarding issues and where we're at, and at what point do we adapt our code to include restorative justice in the mix, ensuring that both the person is getting either a court-ordered required help via, you know, a hoarding disorder treatment, where there's a required check-in, there's coordinated services. I see how important it is that radar is very helpful to our community, but there seems to be, if we are having to have multiple agencies coming out 1, 2, 3 times, that third time should be the time when we are engaging at least a more significant step, because otherwise we're going to get into that cycle, and we can prolong the cycle, or we can work together for a healthier mindset and help navigate that channel without it having to be a harm, but something that would probably help benefit the individual and the community. What are your thoughts about that?
Hoarding is such a difficult task to tackle. The way our codes read, unfortunately, in the codes I've seen, just tackle the violation, not necessarily the person. And I've been to multiple training seminars on hoarding and how to treat the whole thing, because if you don't treat the person, then obviously the situation is going to keep coming back every single time. Unfortunately, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a mental health expert, so that's where the struggle is. And I don't have an answer for you. I'm not.
I think this is something where it would be nice to have some input both from our police chief and maybe somebody from the King County District Court, the Regional Mental Health Court, where they do a lot of this kind of work. And it's good for communities, and it's good for the individual, and it's good for the families. If we have to get to that level, I would like us to look into this. I think it's a healthy avenue and a healthy approach. It's human-centered, it's holistic, and there's, you know, more wins, more gains than harm. I don't know if others feel this way, but maybe I could get a little input from my colleagues when we move on to discussion. But the other thing I have a question about is about updating some of our codes relating to beautification. We have areas within our community that neighbors are to, take care of the easement and keep that clean, weeded, whatnot. And there's different approaches, but sometimes our code doesn't necessarily meet the current code, or sometimes the neighbor's approach doesn't meet the tool in which the community member has chosen to try to improve it by. So I think there might be some room for improvement in our code. And I encourage looking at that. And are we on minor projects? Is it necessary to have a engineer make a plan, or at what point do we have to engage a big sticker purchase for our community members to try to meet the code? There just seems to be some maybe minor subsets that we might need to consider. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall. Thank you. I'm very interested in moving forward with looking at what we can do to adopt those parts of the code that you said. But I definitely want to make sure that we have the public's full involvement. So I'd be interested in what we could propose or what we'd work on for involving the public, letting them know, hey, we're getting ready for a code overhaul. I think it's going to be very important as we grow in balanced parts and delineated parts of the city. I think we're going to definitely need to have more code enforcement. And then I had a question about parking enforcement. And do we have, I think it's very important that we would look at, as we have more parking issues, presumably having a parking enforcement person going around, making sure that people are not parked in the street, which I have definitely seen. So I'm very concerned about people parking in the lane of travel. And then any thoughts on that? And then I have one question on impervious surfaces. How much do those result in complaints? And do you think there are more? And then same with trees. How many tree cutting violations do you think there are, or they seem to comprise? And do you think there are more? Thanks for those three questions.
Okay, so the street parking is actually enforced by the police department. So that's something that has been a struggle actually with the public understanding that I don't enforce the parking, and trying to make them understand what is code enforcement and what is a police matter. And so, yeah, the police would be responsible for enforcing.
So the
that.
funding, like if we said, we want an extra person to go around and enforce that, would not be through your department, it'd be through the police department.
That is correct. Unless I don't know, Dawn might be able to answer this if we are, that would have to be something that I think that you would,
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm
it's
sorry.
if it's private property, Bridget will respond, but if it's, public right of way, it's something the police would respond to.
That's correct. But as far as changing who's the responsible, I don't know how that would proceed. Oh, and then the second question was impervious surface. Yes, I do receive quite a bit of complaints, and I feel like it is increasing. So to answer that question, yes. And then the third one, tree cutting, no, not as much. I feel like a lot of the public and the citizens of this area value the trees, or at least understand the concept of applying for a tree permit. So that seems to have decreased in my mind. I don't have the exact numbers, but I believe that is the case.
Councilmember Baker.
One of the things that is, I find a little concerning is on the International Property Maintenance Code. Are we going to start looking at colors of tarps in people's yards? The International Property Maintenance Code, I don't believe has the tarps within it. Tom, you might be able to Yeah, clarify number that. 2 says restrict tarps color, size, and or That is duration. yeah, that's like an a la carte in a sense. If you want additional restrictions, that might be an additional restriction code. Yeah, I restrictive guess code. I'm really not in favor of the city determining what color of tarp somebody can use in their yard. Mhm. So there's a few of these that I agree with and so a few of these I don't agree with. And picking color of the tarps is one of them. Okay. Yeah, and these are just suggestions for you guys to consider. So, yeah.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing this forward, and it's a very nice summarization. And yeah, the recommendations, I think I mean, just to clarify, the 1 through 6 are not related to the IPMC, correct? Except for number 5.
Except for number
that-
5.
That
yes.
obviously reference it, yeah. Okay, I am definitely with you on wanting the IPMC. It seems like a more reasonable way to go. It's the gold standard. I did have one small question about it, and it is in your example of rodent infestation. I like that it is stronger on that. That's a health safety issue to me. But my question is, what are the approved processes that are referenced there? What does that look like?
For the rodent abatement?
yeah.
Don't know if there's necessarily an approved method. It just speaks to just doing it through the abatement. This might be, Tom's very familiar with the IPMC, so he may be able to weigh in on that. Do you have is there a method in the IPMC that talks about how to remove the rodents?
No, there's not. So if there's a particular method that you'd like to use, then we would customize the code and apply that particular method.
Okay. We've had some input around bait and just wanted to know if there was a position on that. And for the 1 through, I mean, obviously that relates to number 5. I'm not in favor really of any of these other recommendations. Well, 6 you're already doing. Maybe number 1 in my opinion, but certainly not 2, 3, or 4 for me at least. Okay.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you also for bringing this topic forward. I wanted to share just some of my thoughts following your presentation. So one, I wanted to share that I really appreciate how staff works with the residents and leverages service providers who already exist and funding mechanisms to get residents the services they need, and also how you look at the root issues, like with the hoarding example. I also wanted to share, I mean, I personally heard like kudos for the way you approach your work, Bridget. So thank you so much for the way that you work with residents. I realize that many of the situations are probably very difficult to resolve or even to talk about or approach sometimes. So just want to share that feedback that we hear, you know, praises about the way you approach that. I think standardizing and using the IPMC makes a lot of sense for many of the reasons that you mentioned, you know, more objective property standards, establishing minimum requirements, making the requirements specific, easy to understand and enforceable, all makes a lot of sense. I think to the extent that they prioritize health and safety of the residents, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think if there was anything that was not immediately like recognize that as that, I think like the example that Councilmember Baker brought up, if it was like tarp size color, like I don't feel like that makes sense to me, but it sounds like we'll have further conversations where we can go through more of the details, which I think is excellent. My only concern, and we can talk about this more later on when we talk about the specifics of the codes, is like, does this have disparate impacts on those with lower incomes, senior citizens, residents with disabilities? Like if we were trying to enforce that, I just want to make sure that if people are living in their homes, that these don't become a burden for them to stay.
Yeah, I also, I agree with my colleagues. I think updating to the current standards makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, what brought the additional pieces here though? Numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Are these things that we've heard from residents about? Are these areas that we have data showing that it's an issue that people are complaining about?
I periodically have a few complaints, more on the tent, the canopies. I receive complaints on. I know that CTAC recently adopted a code limiting the use on those. So that's where we were trying to give as many options out there available that you might want to consider.
And I think that the garbage collection too is a problem with the junk and the hoarding. And typically, if you encounter that problem, there is no garbage service. And without garbage service, it's very easy for a problem to start very, very quickly.
No, sorry.
People putting
that's
the
one I actually
garbage on,
support, but,
yeah.
no, I think garbage service, I was actually surprised to learn that we didn't mandate garbage collection. But I am a little concerned about us going down the road where we essentially turn into a very heavy-handed HOA. I don't think that's what the residents here want. So, so I think I would support 1 and 5 personally. Councilmember File?
One of the issues that you brought up earlier are neighbors calling on other neighbors regarding, permit violations. And I see that with green solutions, there are growing microgrids. And I bring that up because I don't necessarily see anything addressed here in what we had today, but it's going to be a bigger issue, and we might want to consider addressing or adopting some sort of a more adaptive and up-to-date use for our code and procedure just surrounding solar panel and uses. The technology has come along so far that you're seeing everything from gazebos to sidings. There are a great amount of technology growth that we're not yet adapting to, and we need to be thinking about that because right now our code is pretty dated. And I say that after attending a microgrid seminar meeting today. And given where the funding is at for communities to grow and also meet with our CAP plan, I think we want to encourage this. So I don't see any way for that to happen without some sort of standard violation because our code is so dated. So I would hope to have that looked at. I know it's not on your short list, but I hope that we can come and have that back for us as well.
Deputy Mayor?
First, I want to thank you for the thoughtful presentation that you put together on this. Your slides and explanation of the issues that our city faces with relation to code enforcement was very helpful. And I hope that our community takes time to look at that PowerPoint that you so thoughtfully prepared for us. As far as the options that you proposed for consideration, I support 1. I'm looking forward to hearing more about 2. Color, I think that's a bit, too tight for from my perspective, size and duration. I think the duration element is something that I am curious about, similar to the use of cargo containers, the one per property, like how long? Because someone could have them in perpetuity and that can become a nuisance. So I understand the reasoning behind giving consideration to the amount of time for those types of structures. 3, I think 6 is probably going to put you to a lot of work. If we're going to go for 6 inches, I think that's hard. I think 12 inches for lawn meets my experience. That is a nuisance. And then I agree with council on 5. I think what's presented here makes sense. And I like the idea of coordinating with local churches and nonprofits to work with this stuff. So I think you've really put together a great proposal. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Thank you. Oh, I forgot, I did have one. I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Shrevenick's comments on bait-free rat abatement. I support the city moving in a direction that eliminates the use of those housing traps for rats. They have downstream implications. I'm curious what the impacts would be, and I'm not sure where council stands, but when a rat eats the bait, there's other prey that are impacted by the poisoned rat. So, but I also understand the nuisance of rats. So I'm curious about what our city could potentially do in that area. So I just wanted to bring that up and thank Councilmember Shrevenick and our community member who brought that forward to us to give consideration to, because it is something we do need to give long-term consideration to. Understand the urgency of abating rats, but what are the other options and are they enforceable? So thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to make sure we have the direction we need to come back. Sounds like we're hearing IPMC for sure. Do we want to do a quick thumbs up, thumbs down on the other items?
Sure.
You want to walk us through that, Mayor?
Sure. Number 1, emphasize sanitation require mandatory garbage collection. Saying thumbs on that one.
All right.
Restrict tarps, tent-like structures, temporary pole buildings. Yeah, I think we need to come back on that one. I'm not seeing any consensus.
So are you saying explore it and come back with more details?
Yeah, I think details and maybe some options on that. That's
Okay.
kind of the sense I'm getting. And also we need, I think that's something that we probably want more input from the public on. Lawn and vegetation maintenance, 6 inches adjacent to arterials, 12 inches in other properties.
That's a no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cargo containers. I think 2 thumbs up for that one.
Okay.
Mike.
On that one, I would like more details, like in terms of limited duration, and are there placement details too?
Yeah.
What are the safety and health concerns of it?
I could use some more information on that one too, because it's not something I've thought a whole lot about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Fowle.
One of the new building strategies is to utilize cargo building containers and adapt them to housing uses. They're utilized in.
I don't think that's what we're discussing.
But,
here.
this could, a sideways code can go funky wrong on this issue. And we have to think a little bit bigger than just the container, because it's as simple as that.
Right, if we decided we wanted to allow cargo buildings, so that would be a change in our building code, which is separate from what we're talking about here.
And not too far off of the topic.
Deputy Mayor.
I recognize where Councilmember File is coming from. I think more detail on this issue would be really good to hear. I was considering Rabanco type cargo containers in front of houses that are filled with garbage.
Councilmember Baker. Could you turn your mic, please, Councilmember?
This is limiting the cargo containers to outside of the boundaries of the properties, building boundaries. If I want to, within my building setback, I can
Yeah.
put 3 or 4 containers there if I want to.
It would be limiting that.
Pardon?
It would be limiting that.
It would be limiting what's inside my property boundary?
Yes.
Boundary?
Yeah, it would be limiting it to 1.
It says here, locate one outside the required building setbacks. I'm asking you inside required building setbacks.
I think we mean the same thing, that it would not be conflicting with a building setback. And there could be 1.
If it was conflicting with the building setback.
Well, it can't conflict at all. And the one that can be there cannot conflict with the building setbacks.
Okay, so if I want it within building setbacks, I should be able to put more there. If I wanted to build a house right out of containers as an ADU, I would have more than one
Right.
container.
That would be, I think, different because that would be considered a dwelling unit. These, I think, are just for the purpose of storage containers, but that could be another discussion.
Thank you.
All right, does staff feel like they have what they need? Because I don't think we need to discuss number 6. Sounds like we're doing that. Yeah, Councilor Marshall.
And just to emphasize, I definitely want to see more public participation.
I assume this will be on a quarterly newsletter at some point, Rob.
Of course. Yeah. I also heard a couple other ideas about rodents and microgrids. So I'd like direction on that as well.
Rodents are on here. No.
But the way you deal with them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councilor Shrubnik.
Well, I mean, that goes slightly beyond. I mean, I think the adoption of the IPMC talks about approved methods. So at some point after adoption, assuming we go that direction, we'll need to figure out what those approved processes are. So I'm very comfortable with not dealing with that right at this second.
Councilor File.
I'd like to see if we can consider the regional King County Mental Health Court as a staged approach in addressing hoarding because it works with collaborative mental health partners, behavioral health partners. When the individual is, going through a repeat cycle and what's standardly working with, like radar or local support isn't working. We need to have a lever we can pull to ensure health, safety, and welfare. And it is a lever that can be very beneficial to the individual and not a harm.
Councilor Shrubnik.
Maybe we just need some clarification. Can you confirm, code enforcement, I believe, is not a crime, right? So we don't go with court adjudication of code enforcement issues. Is that a fair statement?
If I understand correctly.
Unless there's a lawsuit. I mean,
Yeah, so you would go, first you would go corrective action or corrective notice, then notice of violation. And then they have the opportunity to be heard in front of a hearing examiner. And then you could eventually go through the court system through orders of abatement and.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm not in favor of further criminalizing this stuff.
Yeah.
frankly.
Councilor File?
Just to make that clear, it's not criminalizing, it is addressing the mental health crises that's underway. And is taking it from the criminal court and putting it in a proper court of a mental health court, which all the systems are in place to help support the individual and the community this way. It's a healthier, human-centered, targeted approach. I think that it would be nice at least to have some more information from our chief, possibly, and maybe our attorney on that. I mean, I would like us to have that information to see how it addresses the issue differently and what's the success. I think that we're not seeing that. We're just seeing what is a criminal practice versus really addressing it in the appropriate sense. Thanks.
What I think I just heard though from Councilmember Shrubnik and from our staff is that at no point does it become a criminal matter. It may go to court as a civil matter between the city and the resident. Can you correct me here, Madam Attorney?
So yeah, I think there's two distinctions we need to make. Generally, under your code enforcement matters, including your notice of violations, they are truly civil. And they're civil because that's the pathway that the staff goes through. Having said that, you have a general ordinance that says any violation of an ordinance could be a misdemeanor. That is rarely used, and they're used for pretty much criminal type conduct of code enforcement, dumping vile stuff down the sewer, stuff like that. But let me clarify what I'm hearing also for the mental health situation. Are you asking for clarification whether there are resources available through a court system, and as a resource to make them available to a potential applicant versus a compelling, because I don't think the city has the authority to compel an individual to participate in a mental health system unless they want to. Their family can. And as a county prosecutor, I, so many years ago, had to participate in what's called civil commitments. So that's a 14-day mental health commitment. Those are kind of my lanes of understanding. And I think some of your comments were going into multiple lanes. So if you could clarify if it's just a resource or more than that.
Well, the resource already starts with referrals, both to local support and through our police and radar. And when that doesn't serve, what mental health regional court often does is a required mental health treatment, and they also connect the individual with support services to really help the solution come to an end and address the healthier outcomes. It's a rare, a lesser needed option, but it is the healthier restorative justice option that we haven't yet considered, but King County uses it very well, and it can benefit the individual, families, the community, and the amount of response calls, amount of complaint calls, and complaints that our city staff receive. So in the end, you usually have a healthier outcome. And I think that part of what we've been doing is looking at healthier outcomes for the ways in which we do things.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I actually would defer to Councilmember Marshall. I know he works in the court system, potentially with deferrals. What I hear the council member, the comments are related to when you get into the court system
And to get into the court system, there generally needs to be a reason. You're arrested, you're detained, something like that, that gets a court to review your case and hopefully give you the services and the court mandated services, if there are any, or deferral, that type of thing. But you have to do something to get into the system. And what I was suggesting is that the city doesn't have the authority to do anything other than, you know, if there's a crime, someone commits a crime, then they go to a court and then the court reviews that specific case.
And Councilmember Marshall was next in line. Councilmember Marshall.
Yep. No, we all definitely joined Councilmember File in looking to see what is out there that we can use to help people, for sure. I mean, that's the whole point, I think, of us being here. That's why every single one of us is here. But it does encompass what I do, at least as a public defender, and I don't know of any mental health court that doesn't require the criminal hook. And then I think the referrals to the community faith-based organizations and the rest of it, that's another great thing that you brought up, emphasized. So that's an awesome part of that too.
Councilor Shubnik.
Councilmember Marshall said it. Thank you.
All right. Anything further? All right, thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation. Next up, staff reports, climate action plan and housing and human services programs, positions and funding updates. City Manager Rob Carr-Lindsay.
Yeah, just a quick update. At the November 7th City Council meeting, you gave us direction to come back with you with a package on the climate action plan and the housing and human services needs. And we're going to do that on January 23rd. So you'll see that packet come here in the next few days. We're excited about that. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you as a council do fully intend to implement the climate action plan, which means you got to fund it. So my understanding is that you do intend to fully fund the climate action plan. The direction we got on November 7th was step one, hire a climate action plan manager to help us figure this all out. And so that's what we're going to be presenting to you, is hiring a climate action plan manager who will help us get everything in place so that we can fully implement the climate action plan, including funding. Similarly, we'll be including a housing and human services manager on a similar track. And then we'll also be including administrative support costs as well, including a new position in finance. So that'll all be coming for your discussion and direction on the 23rd. We're not expecting you to vote on it on the 23rd. We need something like this, needs lots of notice to the public and chances for the public to weigh in. One scenario is we bring it to you on the 23rd, you give us additional feedback, thoughts. Of course, we continue to notify the public and then come back with full adoption by the last meeting in February, possibly. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. If I'm on the wrong track, speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh, looks like I'm on the wrong track. A couple members are.
Councilor File.
Thank you. I believe we're almost there. And I believe that we said, yes, we want to fund the CAP. And yes, we want to hire, a couple lead individuals to help build their team. But I don't think we're saying wait a year and then get started, because we are already off target if we look at what we came up with going into our goals. So if we don't start the work this year in different levels, we're not going to be meeting our goals. So I will not be comfortable with waiting a year for more development. I want to see some development. I'm sure our community does too. But if we want to uphold our end of the agreement with our regional partners, King County, and make our target goals together, we have to do our part. And I don't think we can continue to delay. And I absolutely am all for, finding additional funding. Even if funding helps pay for some of the staff, I don't mind, but I just want to make sure I'm really clear on that.
And I
Thought we were
think
before.
that's what we're discussing on the 23rd.
Well,
Yep. Okay. I think Deputy Mayor had her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too deeply into, too deeply into the discussion. I'm thankful that we're going to be doing outreach to the public on this. And I think that we do need to be mindful that this is an emergency, a climate emergency. And my sense is, yes, it's great we're funding a program manager initially now, but I would like to, I think we do need to be planning for that manager to be able to hire staff as soon as possible, as soon as they are able to. And I'm assuming with what we have going, that manager will be working with current staff that are listed on the agenda from, I believe it was November 7th. But anyway, we have staff that's working on this, but I personally think we do need more funding for FTEs on this still. And I just wanted to state that very clearly, and I don't want to miss the window to make it clear that I believe in fully funding climate action. And so, Rob, you're on the right track. We need to get our community very actively engaged in this. And if it means, and as much as I didn't want to go to an initiative for this, I am all for it because we have to do this now. So I would prefer to find the money elsewhere. That's where I hesitated on that initiative, but it is time. We can do it. Investing in these positions is investing in our community. And it brings the work in that we'll have to, it will get us on track faster. I agree with all of the people who spoke today from our community. And please know, and I want our community to recognize, 3 years ago when I started on the council, I believe climate action, environmental stewardship was number 10. It's number 1 now. Each year, in the past 3 years since I've been on the council and others, it has moved up to number 1. Okay, so I am proud of this council. We have done really great work. We are doing something, we are funding something that has not been funded yet. So apologies for going on a little thing, but we are doing good work. I'm thankful for our community input, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, Your Honor, I have something else.
Yes, I see other nicely.
Yeah,
Mysteriously put on the agenda.
So I just received this in the mail today, and hopefully all of you did too. It's an outreach piece for the transportation element that we're going to be doing. And we actually have a pretty cool community engagement tool that we're going to be using. And you can find that community engagement tool on kenmore2044.com. So we'd like everybody's feedback and thoughts on the tool itself. And it'll be a good way for everybody to provide input on the transportation plan. So that's all I have.
All right. Next up, council member reports and comments. Councilmember Baker.
Yes, a couple of things. I had the opportunity to discuss Step It Up Camp that Maurice Leary is running over at the hangar. And he is providing a lot of after-school educational opportunities to a number of kids from our next door neighbors, the manufactured home community. And I would, since he is providing a really valuable service to our community, I would like to see what we could do to support him and his efforts, because he is really making headway in our kids, with our kids. And you know, I'm always been concerned with kids in our community and wanting to do everything we can for them. And especially the disadvantaged kids next door, I would really like to do what we can do to help him. So If I had support on that, I'd like staff to look into what we could do.
I see Councilmember.
Wonderful.
Yes, sure.
The next thing is sidewalk. Lack of sidewalk between 72nd and 168th. The removal of the white line that was there to separate the parking from the traffic lane has created a racetrack with people coming and trying to speed up to be first at the signal. Handicapped people cannot walk on that side of the street. They have to be in the street because the dirt path from the corner to the park is not wide enough for them.
Talking about Simons? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yes, I'm 72nd to 68th. So I would really like some support to look in to perhaps restriping that solid line there to allow people some refuge to use the street as a traffic way. I have seen myself, women with strollers pushing their kids down the street. I've seen people in wheelchairs dodging traffic along that curb lane. So I would really like to see if something can be done. So anyway, I would like to get some support in that one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Councilor Marshall.
Welcome back, everybody, and thanks to everybody. I'm just marveling at a discovery over in Wayne Golf Course, former Wayne Golf Course, saved by Forterra, and the people park at a cedar tree in there that I never knew existed that has to be at least 100 years old. It is huge, and the branches on the tree, each branch, there's not that many, but each branch is about as large as like a full-grown young tree itself. It is stupendous. I never knew it was there. Discovered it walking with the dog. It's incredible. And then I wanted to bring to everybody's attention that there was a cool article, I can't remember the date, in the Seattle Times Pacific magazine about Octavia Butler, an award-winning, amazing science fiction writer, African-American woman who for about 10 years or so, I think, lived in Lake Forest Park. And that article began just in a beautiful way. I can't quote it. I can butcher it by paraphrase, but it was linking the towering evergreens, such ordinary Pacific Northwest beauty, commonplace Pacific Northwest beauty of the towering evergreens to the place where she lived. And I thought, God, how beautiful to see, to emphasize that it's something so commonplace and something so beautiful that we have. And I hope all of us can work together to try and save what's left. Thanks.
Councilmember Kugler.
I just have a couple of updates. First off, I'm looking forward to our retreat and having the opportunity for us to talk about all that we have in front of us for 2023 and beyond. I also just wanted to share an interesting fact that WashDOT came to the Seashore Transportation Forum and gave a presentation on ultra high-speed rail study that they're doing. Who knows if it will be developed in any of our lifetime, but it sounds pretty interesting. It should go from Vancouver, BC to Washington, to Seattle, to Oregon, up to 250 miles per hour. So the estimate is like 1 hour between each location. And we did ask if they are coordinating with the airport, because there's been talk about developing another airport in our region. We thought that coordination would be really important. Thought you all might be interested in hearing that. I also wanted to mention that I think I informed all of you through email that I was applying to the Domestic Violence Initiative Regional Task Force as an alternate, and I was selected for that. So I'll be serving on that. Thank you.
Councilmember Shubnik.
Yeah, along those lines, I'm
really pleased at how we went through this agenda today, and it was well run. And also just want to thank Bastyr for their great presentation. I didn't want to derail the conversation with questions because I didn't have any. I just thought it was a terrific presentation. And I know they're not here to hear that, but I stepped off the Growth Management Planning Council in late 2022 and will be serving on the Regional Law, Safety and Justice Committee. I was selected for that, and the King Conservation District. It doesn't have the word county in it. I am very much looking forward to both our retreat and the discussion on the 23rd about the climate action work. I'm super excited to get started on that and hope that we can find ways to accelerate. Thanks.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful holiday season and a great new year. I did hear a lot of wonderful compliments from our community for having the menorah out here in front of Kenmore City Hall. A lot of comments about more lights. It'd be great to have more lights, more festive lighting around City Hall and on our trees. And I can absolutely support that. It is nice to see the city of Kenmore embracing intersectionality, multicultural humility, and just bringing forth a very welcoming community. So I couldn't be more proud of our city and the work we're doing. Earlier today, I attended a microgrid consortium meeting, which was fascinating, and I look forward to updates in our one-on-ones to bring in some additional information. I went on a lovely ride along with with our police officer Boyer, who works with radar. And that was just a really great opportunity to see our fine team out there serving the community. And one of the things he did on his route was to stop in and check in on one of our residents and bring her a milkshake. Those little check-ins help decrease the amount of significant response calls and really have made an impact in this community. So I just, again, couldn't be more proud of our community and couldn't be more proud of our city of Kenmore and our staff and the work we all do together, because we help make this happen. So excited for our next meeting. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I just want to thank our community for coming forward with public comment. It is incredibly important and does help us steer our city. So your voices matter, and thank you. I want to thank staff for their outstanding presentations. I agree with Councilmember Srebnick. The Bastyr presentation this evening was outstanding. I'm going to keep this short, so thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it's great to see everybody back. Not a whole lot to report, but during our break, I did go and talk with some civic students over at Inglemoor High School. They had some really great questions about, of all things, the Growth Management Act. So that was a really interesting conversation. And then later on in the break, I met with some Cub Scouts who had a very different priorities. So great meetings with kids. It's always fun to see kids that are asking about what we're doing here locally. And it was great to see all of you at the legislative send-off last week. That was a really great event. So I appreciate all of you popping in for that. And with that, unless there's anything further to come before us, the Kenmore City Council stands adjourned.